Saran Tugsjargal is a trailblazer, the first Mongolian American official in the United States and a National Youth Fellow for the U.S. Department of Labor's CAPE Youth, representing over 2.3 million students with disabilities. Living with multiple disabilities, she turned adversity into advocacy, leading education reform efforts across the country. At just 18 years of age, from mentoring dozens of families to helping pass state legislation, Saran is proving that disability doesn't diminish leadership. It can shape it in extraordinary ways.
Thank you so much, Saran, for taking this time to join me here on AwareNow to share your story. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure and my honor to be here, so thank you so much.
Let's, if you wouldn't mind, take us back to the beginning, Saran. I'd like to know what life was like for you. What are some of your earliest memories of how your differences were seen by others?
So basically, when I was 3 years old, I wasn't able to walk or speak well. I had that very physical delay and that intellectual delay. So seeing that and having that when I was very little was always very challenging for me. I when I was little, I didn't know how to ride a bike. I didn't know how to hold a pencil properly and things like that. So I was very behind my peers. And being behind my peers, it made me very isolated. It made me feel very segregated from my peers. I didn't really knew what to do. Often, when I was since I had those barriers growing up, and I was born that way, I been through a lot of support systems. The way that I saw those support systems of physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, all these types of therapies and support systems, no matter how much they were, the purpose for them was to help me and support me with my journey. A lot of times I saw it as a way to kind of oppress me in some ways. Because I just wanted to be normal. I wanted to be like my peers. I wanted to be playing with dolls and toys. I wanted to be going outside, kicking a ball and things like that. But I didn't have that growing up. I woke up a lot of times in the morning. My mom would take me to the hospital, to go to physical therapy, to go to my next appointment, going to occupational therapy. It just became this, that became what my daily basis became, what my life became growing up. So I didn't really have that. I was really left out on a lot of opportunities, like making friends and things like that. So, and that was kind of my memory of growing up as someone with multiple disabilities and someone with my neurodivergent. And I guess the way that I've seen myself is that I've always felt that I was very different, that I felt really dumb in some ways. I just felt that way growing up because having these support systems, no matter how much they were there to support me, I felt like they were a barrier to me. It just kind of made me feel it and brought me that thought that I'm just going to be different forever. I'm going to feel this way. So, and I think that was kind of a struggle growing up. And for many, many years, I kind of hated my disabilities growing up because I just didn't want it to be, it was too taboo to talk about. It was hard.
Right, for sure. Well, and for you just to feel different, how did other people feel about you? What was it like? How did your peers react to you and your differences? Here you are saying that you felt very isolated, you felt very different. What did they do did they reach out to help you feel connected, or how did they see you?
I think that's a really good question. I think that growing up, for me, I faced a lot of bullying, and a lot of that bullying was caused by peers. So growing up, when I had accommodations, or I would have to picked up from classrooms to go to take a test and things like that, my peers just didn't like that and would see me as that dumb, low kid a lot of the times. And often growing up, I was always told the comment of saying people like you with disabilities will never be successful. Look at yourself. Why would anyone want to be your friend? And sometimes people would say hurtful comments of saying if you were my friend, I would kill myself and things like that. And
Wait,
that really
what? They actually said that?
Mm-hmm. that really impacted me growing up. Like, and sometimes like when I got test scores back, and then I would put on my desk, and sometimes like my classmates would see that test score and they'd be like, "Oh my God, you're always going to be dumb like this. Haha, that's just going to be you forever." And all those comments and those hateful remarks it kind of grew louder. It kind of grew louder in elementary and middle school. I didn't want to go to school. I would come home crying a lot of the time and tell my mom, like, why am I like this? Why was I born with this? Like, why can't I be seen? Why can't I be heard? Why can't I just like be a normal kid for once in my life? And it was just really hard for me growing up, just to really be different. And sometimes I'll be labeled and segregated a lot of times, and that made it hard for me. Sometimes I'd be doing my work in a classroom while everyone else outside is playing on the playground or like doing activities, and I would just not be in that space. I would be too busy trying to get academic support for my needs, and that was just really hard for me to see. I missed a lot of opportunities to make friends and things like that. But sometimes, like, the way that people view my disabilities, they saw that I was just something kid and I was unintelligent to be friends with. And moreover, growing up, I was labeled as emotional disturbance, and that really affected me. And when it's labeled like that, emotional disturbance, it kind of affected my teachers as well. My teachers struggled to help me. They didn't know how to help me. They often would be like, "Why are you causing the problems? Like, why would anyone want to do this to you, Saran? Like, you're the ones causing this problem. Like, I don't get why you're crying all the time," and things like that. And that really affected me because I was like, "You're my teacher. I wish you could hear me once. I wish you could understand what's happening." Because to me, like, I wasn't the problem all the time. I had differences. I had needs. But I wish someone back then would tell me, like, would ask me the questions and flip those questions and ask, like, "What's happening to you? How can I really support you? What's the issue here?" and things like that. Instead of getting those comments saying like, "You are the problem. You're always causing this," and that kind of really affected me growing up.
Because it seems that should be just the opposite, right? That the teacher should come in and should just say, "What is it that you need? How can I help you?" As opposed to the other way around. So let's, outside of the bullying and the social engagement that way, often students who have disabilities, oftentimes will face another issue, and that is limited resources. Is there a story that you have about that? Was there a time when resources were limited and that put you in another disadvantage?
Growing up, my parents are not fluent in English. They are immigrants from Mongolia who, the minute they gave birth to me, they became U.S. citizens, but they didn't have proficient English. So, and I need someone to speak up for me in my IEP meetings. Because as a disability, you have IEP meetings, and I had an IEP. And what I had to do is I had to tell my school about, like, I need translators for my parents. I need to do something for them. And that was a huge barrier because Mongolian is not a very common language. It's seen as a very rare, unknown, obscure language. Like, the only common languages that the school knows is like Chinese, Spanish, and like very common languages. And that was really hard because I didn't have those translators. And that was really hard to see because, like, often, like, not only was I not getting my need, but my parents were not getting my need. And that really affected me growing up. And sometimes I would have to go run back and forth and tell my teacher, it's like, I want my parents to be here. I want them to fluently say what they need from me because they are my parents. And a lot of times my school's like, "We don't have the money for that. We don't have that. We don't know what to do with it." And I'm just like, and that really set me back a lot of time. And the lot of thing is growing up is I don't really know anything about opportunities like recreational activities that's happening recess and things like that. Like, it wasn't available to me. Like, whatever after school program that was available to all my peers, it wasn't available to me. Or something like sometimes going to like programs or things like that, like, it was very hard to say that I have a disability and I have needs because I didn't want to seem like I was needy to people. And that was just very hard because sometimes the word disability and the word is I have needs, it shows off to a lot of people that, like, you are not qualified and you can't be a part of this program and things like that growing up. middle school, what happened was like there were student government elections and things like that. And I was like, oh, I want to do this. I want to try out. Like, I want to do it. And a lot of my peers were like, no, you can't do it. Like, why would you do it? Like, that makes no sense for you. But I ran and I would do these type of things because I just wanted to show people that regardless of what your disability is or who you are, and your disability does not hinder your ability to be a leader, to be successful in this. And that really allowed me to drive those changes. Whatever I saw happening with translation and language access barriers with my parents, it kind of really drove me to really be passionate about these policies and drive that in my communities.
For sure. Well, it makes sense. I mean, for not just for students, but to your point, I mean, that's something that I don't think people think about either. For the parents, for like the whole family to be able to, there has to be accommodations and resources for everyone to be able to sustain your success, not just you, but your parents as well.
Yeah, because if we don't, because what I recognize is when we talk about the why, we all know about the why. We all know that's important for us to be successful. Why is it important to get a 4.0? We all know all of that. But if we don't give the parents the how, then the parents will never know how to get there. We'll never know how to get that kid a 4.0 or get higher. But besides like language access barriers, for me growing up, there wasn't any like academic like advancement programs and things like that. That was just off the side for me. I mean, it was just very taboo for my school to provide it for me growing up. And it was just hard. I mean, sometimes I felt like, I was very academic. I felt very strong about certain academics. I wanted to be in gifted programs. I wanted to be in honors programs growing up. But like, it wasn't available to me. And that really hit a lot. And sometimes, like, if I want to do sports and things like that, it was just not very available to me and very just excluded. So often growing up, I was left on the sidelines. I was excluded. I was segregated. I was labeled. And that really just affected me. But not only was it just happening to me and my parents, it was happening to a lot of Mongolian families and a lot of Mongolian students. And no one really wanted to talk about it because it was too taboo for them. They want to get resources, but it was just too hard. It was hard for them to talk about it. And just seeing it happening to them, you get denied of resources, denied accommodations and all of that, I realized that like, then what should we do about it now? Who should we talk about it? Who should take the courage we need? And historically, there hasn't been any Mongolian leaders. So growing up, I never really looked up to anyone because there was no one that would identify the similar needs that I had or shared my lived experiences.
Yeah, and we talk about that a lot, right? To say that if you can't see it, you can't be it. So if you don't see yourself, is this the reason why? Because you saw a need and you decided to fill it, that you started the Mongolian American Disability Mentorship Program? Let's talk about this.
That was founded in 2022, I believe, the summertime. So before my mentorship program, I was in Mongolia taking care of my grandma, and she asked me, she was like, I was taking care of her in Mongolia, and then I came back and I realized that like my disability should never hinder my ability to be successful. And experiencing what I have firsthand, I started that program. It wasn't a nonprofit or any of that. It was a program. And that program was designed to help Mongolian families and parents, Mongolian students and families, so they can figure out like how to advocate for their kids, how to get accommodations and things like that. And I held two in-person meetings in Los Angeles, California with the consult and the Mongolian Los Angeles Association. They all came. And I partnered with a college counselor that I know of. We did like a 101, like how to advocate for a kid for a disability. And not only was it in English, it was also Mongolian. So we talked about it in Mongolian and we talked to it in English. So it was very accessible for them. And we translated all the way. So over about 60 families came in total. It was hybrid. So it was not only from California, it was across the country. So many parents came in from DC, parents come from LA. There were even people from international as well who wanted to learn about it. And I talked about my experiences, my leadership roles, things like that. But moreover, I talked about things that worked for me growing up. For example, even though my mom did not have the most proficient English, she knew how to advocate for me. She saw it and then she tried to talk about it. And that really helped. She took me to these support systems, even though it was hard for her, even though sometimes we were declined, we were denied. But those type of things I was telling parents is like, in order for your kid to be successful, you have to really see it. You have to see it at a very young age, and you must advocate using these strategies and techniques. And then I talked about like, how does an IEP qualify? How does that 504 qualify? What are the differences and things? And then after that one-on-one, like how to advocate for a kid sessions, I started to have one-on-one mentorship programs for kids. And I had a mentorship. I had a mentor-mentee session with a kid from Los Angeles, and he had autism, and he did it at a level where he couldn't really express his emotions very well. He couldn't really speak very well. And I walked in, and we were on call, and I was like, okay, this is going to be very interesting for me to talk to a kid who also has similar experiences. Instead of me wanting to ask the hard questions and things like that, we started off just talking about our favorite albums and things like that. And surprisingly, we like the same album, Doji. So that was a very fun thing to see. And then I started to play tic-tac-toe with him, and he really loved tic-tac-toe. So I started to really build some relationships skills and social skills with him. And moreover, it wasn't just one session. I built that with him. I did it over and over with him. We had 8 sessions, and I just seen him grow and smile. And I saw him in person, and he had the brightest smile on his face. The brightest smile on his face. Someone who didn't know how to really speak very well, someone who was very shy and didn't want to talk with anyone. He opened up to me, and he talks to people. Now he has friends. And that just really fulfilled my heart. Moreover, I also mentored his mom. His mom was like, I don't know how to advocate for him. What am I supposed to do? And I was like, maybe your kid needs this, or he needs this. Maybe you should try this. And using the resources that I know, but also understanding her experiences, but also using my experiences with systems and things like that. And she was like, I'm scared for my AT meeting. So she was very scared. She was like, oh, it's going to be okay. But I told her that it will be okay. And then she learned how to advocate for her needs, for her kids' needs. And I remember at the next session, she came in, she was crying. And I was like, oh my God, what happened? And she, with a smile on her face, she said, I did it. I advocated for my kid. He got the accommodations he needed. And it really just touched with me that an impact that I made on a kid like that and his family.
Yeah. And thank you for such beautiful stories, both of them. And I think that just is a reminder to all of us that the hard things that we go through then give us the ability to help others who are in those same situations. And so the curse that it is, sometimes it's such a beautiful blessing that you can pass on to someone else as you have done. Let's switch gears a moment to talk about firsts. I have a feeling that you're going to have a long list of the first to this and the first to do that, because one of the firsts of yours, you were one of California's first student commissioners with disabilities. Tell us about some of your other accomplishments that you have, not just nationally, but internationally.
So what I do basically, when 2 years ago, I took the risk to apply to be a student commissioner. I was like, maybe I should do this or maybe I should not. My special ed director was like, I think you should do it. You'd be a great fit for this. And I was like, I'm unsure about it. Basically, I was gaslighting myself before I could even apply for it. But when I heard the news, I was in tears. I knew that I made history, not just for myself, but for the many Mongolian Americans across the country. It wasn't just the first Mongolian American student commissioner with disability. It was actually the first Mongolian American official in the country, and that was really big. And I knew that I made such a big milestone for the state. And a lot of the things that I've done was on the commission was seeing the ways that I can be very involved in. I knew that it was important for me not just to advocate for disabilities in the education system, but also those in foster youth, homeless youth, even juvenile justice, because often those systems are often left out in our systems. We talk about this huge system, we talk about all these systems, but we don't talk about them. And often we don't talk about Indigenous youth or Native youth and things like that. So at that table, when I'm advocating and fighting for in the education system for special needs students, I talk about those important groups, really elevating and amplifying those voices. Moreover, not only just amplifying and elevating those voices, I'm giving policymakers direct recommendations on how you can make the system better. One of my recommendations was stop working in silos, period. We work in silos. And when we work in silos, we don't really address the needs in our communities. And another one was developing like youth councils with disabilities across California and things like that. And talking about how you need to have youth at the front at the table in decision making, because honestly, these policies are for youth and their families and their communities. It's not for the policymakers themselves.
I love how you bring that to the table, because oftentimes, let's talk just disabilities in general, right? We hear about this phrase, nothing for us without us, right? So don't be making decisions without us being at the same table, right? But I love how you're bringing up, don't make decisions about you for youth without youth. It makes sense to have them at the table.
Exactly.
So I love that you're taking this approach and bringing that to them.
And a lot of the times at conferences and etc., what I would do is I ask the hard questions. I ask, who asked for this? Because if it wasn't from the youth and the families and communities, then what the hell are we actually doing here? What's the point of this? And I really asking those hard questions really pushes officials to really rethink the way they want to do policy. And it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of effort for me to be in a room with nearly like 500 plus officials in one room and to tell them and to have my courage to tell them that all of this. It's just an unbelievable thing to see, unreal to see. But I think that not only do I make those recommendations, I really take my time to really sit down with these policymakers and talk about my lived experiences. Because often these policymakers are the ones who did create those laws, who did do certain type of things that created repressive systems that affected me. And me telling them that, yeah, you created those oppressive systems when I grew up. Yeah, you did. But now I'm over it. And now I'm overcame that oppressive system. And now I'll talk about how do we dismantle those oppressive systems so other youth and so families don't go through that one again.
That's awesome.
And that's been the key focus. So as my term went on, I started publication with the Los Angeles County Department of Education and the Disability Rights of California. We outlined 8 recommendations to county Department of Educations and places on like how to reimagine the juvenile justice system and how to better serve those disabilities in those systems. And we outlined 8 recommendations. And our 8 recommendations were like investing more health educators, making mental health a priority, making sure that you identify and accessible, but most importantly, connecting youth with the family, connecting youth with the community and things like that. Mm-hmm. And really, a lot of these recommendations were a way for policymakers to really just see a different picture and really redesign that system, because we don't talk about it, honestly. And you're probably wondering like how I got very involved in juvenile justice. Is actually I went to a conference called Breaking Barriers, and it was my first time. And they asked me, I was like, hey, could you speak? And I was like, oh my God, what? My first conference, you want me to speak? I was very shocked, but I spoke. And at that conference, I started to hear a lot of policymakers about like the different systems they're involved in, social welfare, juvenile justice. And then when I heard about juvenile justice and when I heard about that there is a high percentage of student disabilities in those systems, I said, wow, that's a lot of kids. And that's a lot. I mean, there's 850,000 student disabilities across California I represent. And there's a high number. There's a number. I don't remember the number, but there's a number in that 850,000 percentage in juvenile justice. And I said, wow. And I said, and then it just brought me a bigger picture that I needed to advocate for them as well, because they are part of our systems. Yeah. So not only was I did juvenile justice work in collaborations with different state agencies and partners, I moved on to legislation. And legislation so I had 3 bills signed into law. My first bill was changing emotional disturbance to emotional disability. Actually, like I said, I am someone who's labeled as emotional disturbance. And I remember an assembly member, Dawn Addis, came to our commission meeting and she was like, could you guys support this bill? Could you write a letter of support? Could you vote on this? And when she came in, when she said those words, I started tearing up. I said, this is important. I've been waiting for this moment. I wish it came sooner, but it's better, but I'm glad it came now. So I voted on it, and it was an honor. And now that bill went to the Senate, went to the Assembly, and then it got signed into law by Governor Newsom.
That's amazing.
That was a really huge, important bill. The other one was like an IEP template, a new statewide IEP template, because I said that like an IEP template should not be looking like a resume, or it should be looking like a corporate document. It should be looking like something that appeals to families. So really changing that IEP template, and that got passed and signed into law. Another one was providing medical coverage for those with PANDAS. That's like a neuropediatric disease that a lot of people don't talk about, neuropediatric chronic illness. So I've been advocating for them, and that bill also got signed into law by Governor Newsom. So I had 3 bills signed into law as of last year.
Oh my goodness.
And I guess all my legislation and my work, it just reached the world, I would say. It reached the world. It reached the country, and I never expected that. And when it did reach the world, I was recognized as one of the top 30 disabilities in the world from Diversibility. And that was such a big honor to recognize. As the first person from Mongolia, the first Mongolian American woman to be recognized with that award, it just meant to me that all the work that I've done in policy and using my lived experiences to drive these changes, it's just been an unbelievable experience and a surreal experience. Moreover, like, not only was I very involved in state work, and not only like my work got like imagined and like seen at these levels, it inspired me to dream even bigger. What can I do from here? What can I drive this more? Because there's no such thing as 850,000 across the country. I knew there was more students who needed a voice. That is when I decided to apply to be a National Youth Fellow for the U.S. Department of Labor of ODEP, and then I actually got the position. So I serve as a National Youth Fellow for the U.S. Department of Labor ODEP's Center for Cape Youth, Center for Advancing Employment Policy for Youth. And basically what I do here is not only do I advise like folks at the U.S. Department of Labor of ODEP, I advise 5 different diverse states, actually deeply red states, the next 5 years, to redesign and to use my lived experiences to drive changes in those states, to transition from education to employment for youth with disabilities. And this role, I represent over 2.3 million students with disabilities across the country. Not only am I representing, but I am working with 4 other youth national fellows in this position. So it's an incredible opportunity, an incredible work, because for me, the bill that I really worked on in California, the emotional disturbance bill, I knew that bill should be universal. It should be happening to every other state. And at a national level, I'm focusing on how do we get rid of these labels? How do we start getting more supports in juvenile justice? How do we actually serve students with disabilities? So now I get to work on that nationally.
It's amazing. And I love that you're not only saying, hey, here's the issue and here's the problem, and let me give you my own personal story that showcases that. But then you're saying how you're going further. Because so many people say, well, this is a problem, it needs to be fixed. You're going further to say this is how it can be fixed. And I love that you're doing what you're doing there in California. And, well, how can we broaden this and make us a solution across the country and beyond. So I guess there's one more question I have for you today, Saran, that is when you reflect on everything you've accomplished, which I feel like you're just at the beginning, even though you've already done so much, how do you define yourself today? Not by your diagnosis, not by your ethnicity, but by your impact. So here's the last bit of it here. Fill in the blank. Saran is...
Saran is a world change maker.
I love that. And a world change maker you are, and you're making a world of difference for so many already. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for helping all of us become a bit more aware now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Of course.